Yeah. About what I remembered. Hey there everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide, is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? Stop it! Yes, I see you. Don't lick the inside crook of my elbow. The Ranger's Apprentice, Runes of Gorlan, is a YA fantasy novel written by John Flanagan and released on November 1st, 2004. The book was John Flanagan's debut novel and spawned a series known as The Ranger's Apprentice that has since stretched 16 books long, with the latest of which, The Escape from Filet. I believe that's how that's pronounced. I don't know for sure, so bear with me on that. Published as early as 2021. The Runes of Gorlan received a Aruli this award in 2004 and was chosen as the Children's Book Council of Australia's notable book in 2005. It was nominated for the Rebecca Caudill Young Readers Award as well, but I don't believe it won. Of the various things that I have picked up this month, this one is perhaps the one steeped most in my nostalgia. I didn't ask you for your opinion. I read Hunger Games in high school, and then I read Daniel X in middle school, with Rotten Rune also being in high school too. I remember this one, though, being picked up in early middle school. versus Daniel X late middle school. I even managed to make it all the way to Eroc's Ransom in the series before I ended up dropping it. I didn't like at the time that they switched right back to Will being a young apprentice again, as opposed to when they aged him up to the Sorcerer's Rebellion. Sorcerer's Ransom. I don't believe it's the Ransom. That'd be weird. But anyways, the book where they aged him up and he pretends to be a minstrel and they has him and Alice finally. The point is, I liked it. I didn't like that they re-aged it. But however, looking back on it, apparently that was a one-time thing. So that's a lot more forgivable. If you needed to tell a story for the future books to make sense, that's understandable. I just thought that Flanagan reverted back to it so he could have the Ranger's Apprentice tag better. Truth be told, it's also sort of like... I also sort of have the memory of a goldfish, so... I was really interested in reading it, but after I put down Eroc's Ransom, I forgot the series existed for like a couple years until I saw this on a shelf. I'm like, oh yeah, I love this series, didn't I? Anyway, here's the report card. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Men in Black, but there's a scene in there that I love to think of every time Voodoo annoys me enough. Yeah, I would never do it, but Anyways, let's move on to the cover. Now, this is the cover this cover is the one that I remember as a kid. It's dark enough that I didn't realize it at the time, but this is actually an actor cover sitting in front of a very dark background. For this one, it's okay. I'm not a big fan of live action covers. However, I will say that, again, it's dark enough that you can't really tell. And the silhouetted form that blends very well into the background is very good at setting what a ranger is. Now, obviously, the runes in the background, I'm not sure if those are real or those are like CGI animated, but I assume those are supposed to be the runes of Gorlan. I'll talk more on why I say I assume rather than those are the runes. But yeah, overall for a book, for a cover, it's okay. It's not great. It's not really exciting, but I do believe that it's good. I would just argue that it's bland. And so we move on to the synopsis. Now, as I always say when we get to this part of the review, I read the synopsis on the back of the book in my TBR. I do that so you can see how the book presents itself to new readers. If you're interested in seeing that, please go check out the TBR. I will try to remember the cards, although I have been forgetting them quite a bit. But, if you see a little white line appear over here, that I remembered. For the sake of this review, I'm going to give you some context as what the book is about. The book follows Will, no last name. Will is a ward of the castle of He's a ward of Castle Redmont, who basically he was a young child who was orphaned, and the Baron of Redmont took him in to raise him under his rule, basically. At the age of 15, eventually they reach an age where the wards of the castle are assigned underneath a craftsmaster. Think of it like specialized training, like trade school. Once they reach old enough, they join under one of the craftsmasters, the head of a craft that serves to better the castle and the fief that they're currently in, to prove their worth. If they don't do that, they get assigned to a random peasant family as a farmer. Now, Will always wanted to go into battle school, which is basically the night school. However, he finds that instead of being accepted into battle school like he wanted, he is instead taken in as a ranger's apprentice. The Rangers, a mysterious group that operates solely in the shadows and are rumored to be sorcerers. Will doesn't know what to think of this at first, thinking he's letting his father down. However, as time goes on, Will learns more about who his father actually was and what it actually means to become a ranger's apprentice, becoming friends with old bullies and learning his place in the world in the grand scheme of things. And that's pretty much it. Now, on to the review. And this book is about exactly what I expected it would be on a return. It's still a decent read. It's a YA fantasy novel, and obviously it's hard to be harsh on some of the things I would be for a more adult fantasy novel. For example, the battle school is basically just treated as a prep school for the rich kids, complete with a group of second-year students making life a living hell for the poorer transfer student, Horace, who was Will's old bully, in a very clear replication of what is supposed to be hazing. The book isn't terribly complex either. It's written in third-person omniscience, so we always see what's going on. There's no mystery to how people act. And we're never really left to our imaginations on that front, and so on. It's everything you expect in a YA fantasy novel. I think one of the biggest complaints I can note about this book is that of the fantasy element, it's rather derivative of every book you've read, of every other fantasy work. There's nothing in this book that solely feels like it's a creation for this book. It just sort of feels like it borrowed a whole bunch of other elements and smushed them together into its own world, but not necessarily in a way that makes you think, oh, that's unique. The Rangers just feel kind of like clear replications of Rangers from Lord of the Rings. You know, it's just your generic medieval Europe fantasy novel. There's nothing unique there doesn't feel like there's anything unique to it. Another great example is the main bad guy's name is Morgoth, who has mental domination powers, lives in a dark, secluded mountain range in a fortress that can't be reached by most others, and uses his mental domination powers on inhuman monsters to use them to try and destroy the rest of the world of men. He feels like a diet version of Sauron mixed with the black for the world's name. Also, not to be a more minor nitpick, this book is also mildly misleading. For example, if you're going to call your story The Runes of Gorlan, the name of a setting within your book, you kind of want your book to be focused around that setting, don't you? Whether it just be in myth or that's where the majority of the book takes place. You want that to have a relevant meaning to the book itself. You don't want it to just be a location. Unfortunately for this book, it's just a location. The Runes of Gorlan is where the final battle takes place, yes, but it comes off more like a circumstance. There's no, this was purposely set up. It was, they were fighting and they happened to start fighting around this area and nothing else. And nothing else was around. So that's about what I got for that. I mean, apart from those things, though, it relatively holds up on a reread. Unlike Daniel X, where I despised everything I reread due to how juvenile it was, this is more juvenile in a more charming and understandable way. I would say this is on the younger end of young adult. I would probably also say it's more children's novel than young adult, if you ask my personal opinion. But for the most part, it's perfectly fine on a reread. It's not something I look back on and think, I shouldn't have done that. Unlike Daniel X, where the short chapters and the choppy writing led it to me reading through it like feeling like I was on a rocket speeding towards Mars, or Rotten Rune, where some things were just so stretched out it felt like I was dragging my feet at times. this book takes effective use. It doesn't feel like a single page is wasted on this. Not a single scene. Everything contributes to the overall narrative of the book itself. It was a short read, but it wasn't an unsatisfying one. I also like the twist about who Will's father ends up being. There's a big hint of a mystery where Will thinks his father was a knight in the Baron's service who died fighting Morgoth and forcing him back into Middle Earth. I mean, the mountains of dark and evil. Oh, hold on. Rain and Night, my bad. The Mountains of Rain and Night. So you get to a point where you think it's going to go the cliche route, and it's revealed that Will's father is actually this one, and oh no, that legacy is now going to be hung over Will for good or bad. No, it's really nothing that grand. It's not a huge spoiler, but I'm not going to spoil it here. I just think it was a very nice twist of the typical cliche. As cliche as the rest of this book is, that was a nice twist. I wouldn't say it greatly affects your opinion about the character or what happens in the book, because it comes at the very end of the book. But otherwise, I do believe that it's a good use of it. I just personally think that as an adult, it probably won't appeal to you as much as if you were a younger kid. I would say that this is more definitely aimed at a younger audience. As a kid, I definitely identified with people in this. I actually wasn't as big as I am now back in the day. I was actually a smaller kid. I hit a bump like in high school. But you don't question the bullies in battle school. You don't question how Will feels or how Horace feels. You just sort of accept it. It's just not for adult readers, is what I'm saying. So with that in mind, I'd give this book a 7 out of 10. I guess when it gets to here, I could just repeat myself and talk about how it's not meant for an adult audience. It's very clearly aimed at a younger audience, and that as an adult, you may not find much to read, but as a kid, it's something you would probably very closely identify with. But to save us all some time, I won't do that. I just personally think, apart from the age range, this book in fantasy is a little bland. Just a bit bland. It clearly borrows a lot from Lord of the Rings and places it all in a rather generic European fantasy setting. I think if you change very little, this could actually come off more like a historical fiction than a fantasy novel. Even though I know it gets a little more crazy with the fantasy elements later on. So, but the question comes, does it deserve Mount Doom? The answer is no. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about this. I would recommend this mode for someone between the age ranges of 13 to about 16. Although I will say that if you want to pick it up at any time, it probably works. Just keep in mind that it's a young adult novel that very closely resembles a children's novel to an extent. Because, something like Lightning Thief is considered a children's novel, but I would say that the writing of Lightning Thief is about on brand for The Ranger's Apprentice. At least for the first book. The end of the month is upon us. Soon will be in August, where I need to work out what my TBR is going to be. Man, sometimes these days just pass by way too fast, and it's like blink, and before you know it, it's gone. With that being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones.